Well, hello everyone, and welcome to this month's Lemongrass Live. So if you've not been to one of these before, this is our open chat on key themes and topics that are kind of important to us in the SAP on Amazon universe. Just a quick mention, if you've got any questions, any comments, any thoughts, anything pops into your head during the session, feel free to punch it down into the questions box at the bottom, and we'll do our best to get down to them. If we don't, we'll sure as hell follow up with you afterwards. So today's topic, a bit of an interesting one. We're going to dive into the often understood world of how to optimize SAP migration windows when you're moving into the cloud. It's often seen sometimes as a little bit of a blocker. Organizations often not having the downtime as they perceive required to move into the cloud. And it's a bit of a catch-22. They're not getting the migration window means they suffer more downtime from not getting the cloud benefits. So it's a little bit of an on-premise present for a lot of organizations when you dive into it. So today we've assembled a bit of an SAP Migration Avengers team here to talk about their experience on SAP migrations, recommendations that they've seen from their time for migrations and from doing industry, and including the all-important voice of the customer who's on the call today. So with that, let me just open up the line here and just ask each of my friends and colleagues here to do a quick introduction. So George, let's start with you.
Sure. So I'm George Toon. I was the lead architect in this particular migration, and I've been doing SAP for many, many years, and I've been focused on the public cloud now for 6 years.
Thanks, George. Scott.
Hi, everyone. Scott Druckenmiller here. I'm with AWS. I'm part of our worldwide business development team. I joined AWS over the last year after spending 18 years with SAP.
Thanks, Scott. And Eric, of course.
Eric O'Dell, Rank Group out of New Zealand. I was partnered with George on our effort to move Reynolds Consumer Products to the AWS cloud.
Fantastic, thanks guys. Right, so let's get this party started. So let's start with the first question, and I'm going to back this one over to you, George. So I think it's fair to say from your opening statement, there are probably more years of SAP experience on this call than most of us will live. I think would probably be a safe assumption, actually. But I think it's fair to say that we've worked on a wide range of migrations, a large diversity of organizations and customers. And the term near zero is something that we've spoken about for a long time, but I'd say over the last sort of 6-7 years with the emergence of cloud, the term near zero downtime has really evolved and changed, and it means different things to different people. Expectations of what that means have also increased with obviously the pinch point coming on core systems. So be interested on your views. Explain your experience on what you've seen with the term near zero downtime.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's several tools to help optimize downtime out there from a technical perspective. But the key to getting to near, right, and I put that in quotes because near zero, I mean, is 100 hours near zero? Well, it depends if you're comparing 1,000, right? And as we optimize the technical downtime to the lowest possible area that is acceptable to the business to give the time back of any available window to business process change. In the case of Reynolds, I think the overall window was targeted at 60 hours, and 60 was indeed the near zero that we could achieve there. The technical downtime was about 12 or 14 of it, and we had a huge team of people managing all of it. Now, with Reynolds migrating away from the core system that was shared with other companies inside of the Rank organization, the criticality of moving the least amount of downtime possible from a technical perspective to give the business the most amount of time to transform what they're doing and transform that intercompany relationship into a vendor client kind of relationship. So I think, Scott, have you had some additional experience you wanted to share?
Yeah, I mean, one I always like to talk about, like companies like the nuclear research, done studies where planned and unplanned, when companies go from SAP on-prem to the cloud to reduce planned by 29% downtime or unplanned by 30%. But I think of two customer stories, right? Hudson, Hud Bay Materials, one of the benefits they got by moving ECC 6.0 over to AWS cloud was not only were they able to reduce their downtime to near zero, but also the performance improvements they received. Then I also look at this case when they were able to reduce almost to 100% availability on high availability, but when they did disaster recovery, it was taking them days to recover from disaster recovery, and they were able to narrow that down to just hours. So a lot of different use cases where big improvement both on the near downtime, but also on the performance was really important for SAP customers and saving the costs.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that we used at Reynolds to optimize the downtime was the LCP migrate tooling. And specifically what LCP migrates processes do is takes the top X number of tables. In the case of Reynolds, we picked 5, I believe, as the top 5 tables. And then we took the cut of those tables of the static data, and we migrated that during the uptime. And that was the key in allowing us to get the total export-import technical downtime into that 12-hour window that enabled the overall business transformation.
Okay, thanks, George. So, most important voice in the room, I'm sure you guys won't mind me saying that, Eric. So I know, in Reynolds, you had some really, really tight specific dates, right? And we know how under the cosh you were with those dates. You can't miss that window. It's got to be in by then. We've got peak business hours coming in. Just be really interested to get your view on, the drivers, the fixed state nature of the way the business works, and what the key approach was for Reynolds when you were looking at the migration.
Yeah, we rapidly moved into execution mode. So again, being part of a private equity firm, when Reynolds Consumer Products was when the announcement was made to go IPO, we've kind of learned about it when the street did, and the expectation for delivery of a separate system from the shared environment that Reynolds shared with Pactiv. That date was already set, at the point in time that the announcement of the IPO was made. So execution timeline was fixed, and we had to move forward. Interestingly enough, as George says, moving the static data, this was one where RCP was burdened to some extent with that shared system. So their sister company, which happens to be Pactiv, uses a product called Vistex. Probably many of you on the phone know about this. Unfortunately, we were at the version that did not allow archiving of that table, largest table in the database. And by leveraging this approach, most of that table was moved in uptime as opposed to the downtime window, significantly reducing our technical downtime. There was a lot of process change, obviously, on the Reynolds side, because for 20 years, Reynolds and Pactiv had learned to optimize the transactions within SAP as intercompany. Pactiv does 3PL for Reynolds. And so there's some tight integration that was happening there. All of that had to be redesigned, pushed back into EDI transactions, and really go to a customer vendor. So the bulk of the window, which our target was, I think, 60 hours, we actually made, I think, 68. The bulk of the window was around the functional changes. And in fact, our delay in meeting the 60 hours was around some functional issues that transactions weren't flowing properly in terms of change notices back to Pactiv that they had to get corrected kind of in the last minute. So, but if it wasn't for reducing that technical downtime window, we would never have been able to make the 60.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So sort of switching topic a little bit, I think one of the things in my job in Lemongrass, when looking after sort of technical architecture innovation, is kind of we always focusing on how can we reduce risks up front, getting those done as early as we can. So sort of the known unknowns, if that makes sense, converting those through. So that's a key area that we focus people, technology, and process, and of course automation at. So Scott, I guess a key one with the Amazon hat on, with that sort of known unknowns sort of moniker in your head, and I know as a veteran of yourself going through many cloud experiences, just be really interested to get sort of the wide angle lens view on what else you see in Amazon as you look at learnings across the cloud migration ecosystem.
Yeah, I think the prep time is important, right? So one of the big things is doing discovery workshops, right, to really assess kind of the cloud readiness of an organization and really understand and do the planning is so critical. And the workshops allow that to do that, because the flexibility of setting up regions and availability zones and landing zones and all that is so critical on when you're looking at near downtime, because you need to make sure that it's well architected for all different types of scenarios, even disaster recovery, to make sure if something happens, you're set up in the appropriate way. And the other thing we see a lot is, coming from SAP for 18 years is proof of concepts. In the cloud, it's so easy to do a small proof of concept and test something out, experience it, and move forward, right? I think of my 18 years ago at SAP, you had to go buy hardware and set up data centers, and that flexibility and agility to do things was really difficult. Now in the cloud is you can put something up and running, test it, and go live really quick. So those are things I see a lot of benefits going with the cloud to prevent, to optimize the downtime.
Thanks, Scott. So let's test that. So Eric, I'd just be interested to hear from you in what confidence did that preparation steps that Scott talks about, what did that give you as you went through your experience?
Well, yeah, boy, multitude. We were converting from AIX and Oracle to HANA in AWS. We had actually earlier done a BW on HANA in our private data center. It only took us, about 6 months to get the hardware in, get it stood up, get it functional, and then get it operational so that we could actually start the projects of BW on HANA. Versus the couple of weeks it took, obviously, to get the entire dev environment constructed with the assistance of Lemongrass. So that flexibility is certainly there, and as part of our project effort, interestingly enough, DR, we fully executed a full failover between what we decided to do, which was availability zones. And what's even more important is, we started out in the project with some key systems that we said we think these are critical for relatively instantaneous failover. That list has now changed as we have continued to test and execute DR tests, and that's relatively quick and easy to do, obviously, by leveraging AWS.
Thanks, Eric. Topically, we just had a question actually from Sudendu. Thanks for the question. Just asks, what would your downtime have been without the near zero downtime approach, roughly?
Well, the database size of our largest ERP system, which is called PTP, is about 12 terabytes. And so likely we could have been looking at 24 plus hours, I would think. That's assuming that we could have gotten multiple threads going out, multiple streams, connections to AWS from the VPN connection. I think it would have been very tough for us to probably pull that off under much less than 30 or 36 hours.
Yeah, and if you think about the business impact of that, right? I mean, from 12 to 14 technical hours to 36 is huge. And specifically on the SAP side, Sudendu, we would have fell back to DMO of some. I mean, obviously with a database migration, we've got to do some sort of export and import. You can't get from big Indian on-premise to little Indian in the cloud without doing that. So we would have fallen back to DMO of some, and we would have been faced with optimizing the business side of that to get it back into the 60-hour window, because that was fixed. I mean, the manufacturing company, they were doing manual manufacturing steps to take the outage. So
yeah, good question, thank you. George, while I got you on the spot then, so something we talk about daily, at least, I think, as part of life in Lemongrass. Automation is kind of the secret sauce, the DNA of what we do, trying to optimize the world of SAP. And it really is the core USP, I think, around why cloud and why it gives you the agility on top of that. So warts and all, don't be shy. what are some of the best learnings that you've seen with Reynolds, obviously, but I'd say also in the wider context about the adoption of automation for migrations and the key differences that that's made?
Yeah, I mean, automation is absolutely critical when we start moving into the cloud, and the idea of infrastructure as code is crucial, right? So here at Lemongrass, we use the LCP platform. We combine both EC2 deployments, EBS deployments, which is, by the way, EC2 is the compute for guys that aren't familiar with AWS, and EBS is the disk storage subsystem. We deploy EFS. We deploy our landing zones as code. So the key to automation is the ability to react quickly and deal with business changes in the middle of it without missing a beat, right? So two of the key things that it provided for at Reynolds were we built the QA systems in parallel so that the business testing cycles never ended, right? So they worked all the way up until Friday on QA1, QA2, QA3, whatever, and then on Monday they came into QA2, 3, or 4, right? So the business testing cycles flowed just seamlessly. We added one in the middle, and it was through the power of AWS's infinite capability, and of course it's not truly infinite, but if you never hit a roadblock with capacity, is it how much more you got? It's relatively infinite, and that kind of structure really worked well. And I know in the beginning it's always a little painful because Eric talked about, hey, it took you 2 weeks to deliver dev. Well, I think it's more like 3 or 4 actually, but but once we get the platform prepared and available, we can deploy it relatively instantly. And I mean, it's not at the snap of your fingers, but it is within a couple of days we can have a new QA environment running. So I mean, Eric, I think you had a slightly different perspective, maybe.
Again, new to the cloud when we started the journey, so you kind of walk in with this concept of, oh, you should be able to spin up servers relatively quickly. And the initial dev build out, from my initial perspective, seemed to be taking longer than expected. So I harassed George on a frequent basis about that. Hey, this is supposed to be fast. We're getting our templates down. We're getting our procedures down. We have to scrap these sometimes, rerun them, make sure we've got everything done. Again, being somewhat new to it, I was just kind of like, okay, he's feeding me a line to keep me placated. But what we noticed as we went through the QA cycles, and in fact, we added a full QA dress rehearsal really at the last minute because, again, to help optimize really more the functional side than the technical side. And with all that automation behind us, we didn't even notice it from an impact perspective from resourcing the project. So I am a believer now. You're in the public cloud. You've got to deploy through code. If you're not deploying through code, you're staging a problem that will occur.
Right.
Nice. Thanks, Eric. Right, I'm going to call time out on the general chat here. We've had a few more questions come in. So the first one is, what do we do for a business that runs globally with time zones for cutover? So I'm guessing that's 24/7 operations with time zones. Eric, I think that kind of fits in with the Reynolds model quite nicely. Yeah. So what's your view on global operations with no time is a downtime? There are no such thing as weekends. That's something obviously that you faced in your migration.
Well, we're Reynolds is primarily North American based, Canada, US, Mexico. So while we didn't face the I guess the global perspective, we did face the fact that we had a short window that we needed to shrink on the technical side. I know that AWS has functional platforms allowing you to cross region and run that really in a synchronized mode. We opted for primarily a cross availability zone availability as opposed to cross region to start out with Reynolds. I'm sure we're going to grow to that over time as the business becomes more and more aware of and more dependent on their systems. So I'm not sure that we're a great global example in this particular case, but you know, I think the near zero downtime is the thing to focus on.
Yeah, yeah, and I just add in as well. I mean, a lot of the migrations that we do, it doesn't all have to be in the one window, the one weekend. You can fragment that into multiple bite-sized chunks as well. So that's something else we've done in other clients as well. So that's a good question. What's a good next one? What have we got? Well, here's a good one. What are the barriers to near zero downtime migration, and what are the required conditions? Perfect storm conditions there. George, why don't you take that one?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, in any migration, there's going to be a set of prerequisites, and the good consulting answer is it depends, of course, right? And the keys that it depends on is where are you coming from and where are you going to, right? So in the case of Reynolds, we came from big Indian Oracle clusters to HANA in the cloud. So our prerequisites there were, you know, we had a support pack stack level. We've got, you know, some structure. We went from, I believe it was ECC 6.0 Enhancement Pack 5 to Enhancement Pack 7. So we had some upgrade prerequisites to do. Obviously, the you know, the SAP tools needed to be upgraded and ensured that those were at the right level. So we did a pre-upgrade with you know, the SAP tools to get those to the right levels, and then of course you know, kernels and so forth, and took a small, you know, small outage to do the patching, you know, months before the cutover, and then we, you know, we satisfied all of those prerequisites and did the migration. Now, when we're going from on BW side from HANA to HANA, that is a much more straightforward migration, and frankly, we just replicated the data with HSR, and BW was up in a matter of minutes, just sitting around waiting.
Yeah, thank you. What else have we got here? Well, here's another one, nice one. What's the best tool to migrate SAP systems and databases to Amazon EC2? And when will HANA become an Amazon RDS option? Well, that's something we've all been asking for a while. Scott, that one's got to go to you, I'm afraid.
Yeah, well, I mean, one of the big things with AWS and Amazon is we always like to work backwards from our customers and really understand what their needs are. And when you look at SAP customers, SAP environments are very unique, right? So at AWS, we want to make sure we create tools that are very tailored towards our SAP customers. One of them, like Launch Wizard, which really is set up to speed up that migration and create a wizard to migrate, you know, over to AWS in the cloud. But also even things like, you know, SAP's got their own tools, but what we do is we build on top of those. You know, even backup tools, we have something called backend to actually speed up and optimize how you migrate or how you back up your database, you know, within the cloud. So very tailored, which is very important because, you know, understanding how SAP works and how HANA works, that experience is critical, especially when we're talking about near downtime. If you don't have that experience on how to migrate and back up and all these type of automation tools, you know, if your financials or manufacturing goes down, that's not a good thing. So we're constantly working with our customers to improve that, and even add automation tools like a CloudWatch, so that we can actually monitor environments and then, you know, expand or decline or reduce when we need to. So those are the type of things that we're constantly working with our SAP customers on.
Mm-hmm. Cool, thanks. And I just chip on that as well and say, look, in our own experience with our automation layer, and you're right, sits on top of Amazon and standard calls and sits below SAP with the standard APIs and standard calls. Use it as an orchestration layer. Something that we've seen is the actual automation tool can become a lock-in if you're locked into that tool as well. So keeping that open is a really important thing and near and dear to our hearts as well. Good question, thank you. Right, conscious of time, because we've been talking for 28 minutes already. So just like to wrap up with a little bit of a question for you all. So imagine you're stranded on a desert island, and the only thing you've got company is an ECC system. So if you have to pick just one of your learnings to take with you, just one key takeaway, what would it be in just a paragraph or more? So George, let's start with you.
Yeah, so from my perspective, we've got to automate everything possible and document everything else. I mean, even with the orchestration tools at Lemongrass, not everything is there. might be someday, but then SAP is going to come up with something new anyway. So it's automate and document is definitely the key for me.
Okay, thank you. Scott, same question.
Yeah, I always I go back to having a well-architected, framework to start with. I mean, when you look at, how you set up regions, and then in each region having multiple availability zones, and then landing zones is so critical. And then, how do you plan for everything, right? And not that you can plan for everything, but try to plan for as much as you can. And it all starts with a well-architected framework.
Yeah, absolutely. And by no means least, Eric, love your review.
I'm going to be all on the planning side. Near zero time downtime was great. It gave a lot of time to the functional team, but we went through initially a 2-week planning session with the team at Lemongrass, lay out our landing zones, decide our design considerations to move forward. At first, coming in, I thought those 2 weeks was probably a little heavy. In retrospect, not at all. And really, our design has not changed much from when we walked out of that room. The other piece that I think is pretty critical from my perspective is the discovery tools that Lemongrass brought to the table. So the average tenure of our staff is 15 plus years. So quite candidly, we walked in thinking we knew everything about the system. And George convinced me to add a little surcharge, I guess, to the project. And I kind of thought, well, okay, he's just trying to upsell me in terms of this discovery tool. But as we deployed the discovery tool, and it really gets to not only server-to-server communications, but actually the command lines that the servers are executing, and it does that matchup for you. We discovered one critical system that everybody forgot about, only was in production, happened to run our stacker crane environment for one of our large manufacturing facilities for Reynolds. And had we missed that could have been catastrophic to our migration. So it's all in that prep phase where I see the greatest value that we got probably from Lemongrass, in addition to the fact that you could squeeze that downtime window from a technical perspective.
Yeah. Thanks, Eric. It's that wonderful Amazon phrase, isn't it? There's no compression algorithm for experience. It's kind of true, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant. We've been doing this for more than a decade now. So that.
Absolutely. Thanks, Scott. Right, so we have got some more questions, I could see, but we are probably out of time to dive into another one. So what we'll do is we'll come back to the other questions that I can see on email. So we've got them all logged. We'll come back to you. Just like to remind everyone, we've got another Lemongrass Live debate in June, and the topic of the next one will be how to get the most from a proof of concept. Sort of touches on some of the points that were mentioned earlier on. So with that, I'd just like to again extend my thanks to my friends and colleagues here on the call for joining us, and hope you have a great rest of the day.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.